Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this workshop, How to Teach Haiku with Paul Conneally. I'm Alice Turner, the Education Projects Coordinator at the Japan Society. One of the reasons we're hosting today's workshop is to celebrate the JAL Foundation's 17th World Haiku Contest. So we hope you'll feel inspired after today to create haiku with your students or children and enter the contest. We'll remind you about that later. So now it's my pleasure to welcome Paul Conneally to lead today's workshop. Paul is an internationally acclaimed haiku poet, and he leads the judging panel for the JAL Foundation World Children's Haiku Contest. He has led many workshops for both children and adults, and I'm delighted he is joining us today to share his expert knowledge on haiku and his advice on how to teach it. So I'll hand over to you now, Paul.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Little Onion. Of course, you've just heard that my parents didn't call me Little Onion. They didn't kind of cradle me in their arms and say, oh, he looks just like an onion, though maybe I did. My name, Little Onion, comes from my haiku master, who, when I reached a certain level of proficiency, decided to give me a haiku name. And he said, Paul, it's Little Onion. And I said, Little Onion, why Little Onion? He said, because every time I pull back one layer, I find another. So today you can call me Little, you can call me Onion, you can call me Little Onion, you can call me Paul. I don't mind. But don't call me anything else. Well, you might feel like it after about 5 minutes of me talking. So haiku. For such a short poem, haiku also have many layers, a little bit like that onion that I just spoke about. And I like to explore what you feel haiku are, because I'm sure you must have an opinion now. You might have already taught haiku, and you will have taught it in a particular way. I'm going to give you my take on what haiku is, and what haiku in the West is, and the kind of haiku that maybe you might write with your students or yourself as you move towards entering the JAL Foundation Haiku Competition, which this year is about towns and cities, which might not seem the subject for haiku, but we'll soon see. Would anybody like to tell us what they actually think haiku are? What is a haiku? Anybody want to butt in?
I can see Karina. Karina has her hand up. Would you like to say, Karina?
Is it a short poem?
Okay, short poem. Anything else? Anybody want to add anything else to that? It's a short poem.
Well, I think I see haiku as one of the things haiku does is to make connections between things that you wouldn't ordinarily make connections between. You do it kind of unconsciously a lot of the time.
So we've got a short poem that kind of makes connections between things that might not normally have connections. And we might write a haiku unconsciously, or it comes from our subconscious somewhere while we're out. Okay, anybody want to say anything else about haiku? When you're teaching it to your children, what might be, or your students, what might be important things that you think they ought to know about haiku?
In the chat, Paul, I can see that Alejandra's put a short form of Japanese poetry, and Jenny has written a short poem that takes in the world around you. And Dion has written 3 lines with a question mark.
Okay. Any more?
It's got quite often the in the moment.
In the moment. Okay.
I can see Chris Bradley has said the first line's meaning is uncovered by the second line in the third line. Sophie said 575.
Okay, 575.
Stefania, triggers emotions. I'm just going to read out more because we've got quite a lot coming in.
Yeah, read them through. Let's hear them. Let's hear them.
Usually has seasonal reference. 575 syllables, question mark. Season, a snapshot of life. Seasonality, again. I once read that they often evoke a sense of impermanence through change. And someone else has just added juxtaposition and encapsulation. So we've got lots of ideas coming in.
Do you know what? They're all right in their own way. I want to pick out a few of them. So it's a short poem. It's the form is from Japan. So Japanese short form poetry, probably the most famous form of poetry from Japan as known in the West, along with tanka poems, which follow on from haiku probably. 575, that came up a few times. 575, when people say 575, they're talking about a 575 syllable count, or in Japanese, onji, sounds. And this is the way that I most normally see haiku taught in our classrooms around the country, taught as a short poem with 3 lines. I noticed somebody put a question mark, and they were right to put a question mark because it doesn't have to be in 3 lines, and it just falls into 3 sections in a way. So 575 syllables. This is the way I normally hear it taught. And if I go somewhere and say, well, does it have to be 575? We'll explore that in a minute. But it's the way it's most commonly taught. And in Japanese, I would say that it's predominantly 575 sounds. Well, it is 575 sounds because the Japanese language falls quite nicely into those 5, 7, 5, 7 kind of rhythmic ways of working, which is why it's developed that way, and which is why we have in our sonnets, we have iambic pentameter and things, because our language seems to fall into those kind of blocks quite easily. So a 575 poem, I also heard people say some reference to nature and seasonality. All these things we're going to touch on as we work through haiku. I want to go back to the beginnings of haiku. Where did haiku begin? If we're going to teach haiku, I think it's incumbent upon us as teachers to engage with them before we move into the classroom, and to have read some haiku as well. And I think it's important for our students to have read or looked at or heard haiku spoken out, and to speak some out, because then you get a feel for what haiku are without even having to learn the rules. The rules start to reveal themselves, if you like. So the most famous haiku poet, I think we've probably got a picture of him, Alice. I think you've got a picture of Basho. Of course, we haven't got a photograph of him. Oh, there he is. That's one of the pictures of Basho. He's often shown as a Buddhist monk, although there's conjecture as to whether he actually was a Buddhist monk, but he definitely dressed like a Buddhist monk, a Zen Buddhist monk, and he would walk around Japan. He's famous for walking across and through, taking journeys through Japan. His most famous book is a book which follows him along the narrow roads of Japan, calling at villages, and he recounts his journey in what we call Haibunic prose, interspersed with haiku poems. He lived just around the time Shakespeare was dying, actually. So he was born in 1644 and he died in 1694. So it's a long time ago. And at that time, haiku weren't even called haiku. They only became called haiku really at the end of the 19th century through the poet Shiki. So Basho, shall we have a look at his most famous poem? His most famous poem that all Japanese children have to learn. I thought somebody's going to read. Somebody said they were going to read this for me in Japanese.
Yes. 古池や買わず飛び込む水の音。
Could you read it again for me?
古池や買わず飛び込む水の音。
Now, if we look at that poem, that is in 575 syllables. Read it and count them as you do it. Furuiki ya kawazu tobikomu mizo no oto. 575 sounds. And that might be a guide for us to say, well, that's what they must be then. If they're 575 syllables in Japanese, surely that's the way we should teach them. And of course, our children need to know that in Japanese, these poems are 575 syllables, and it's quite fun to write haiku as 575 syllable poems. But we often finish up with quite bad haiku. In fact, the national curriculum, when it was in its first incarnation, when haiku were part of it, suggested that a good haiku was something like, I have a puppy. I love my little puppy. It is a nice dog. A 575 poem, but a terrible poem and a terrible haiku. Why would the national curriculum put that down? How can it be #1 art? It's #1 art, haiku, if it was just about syllable counting. And I was really pleased to hear when you were putting your suggestions out about what haiku were, the other things that were coming up, because the other rules or guidelines are what make haiku a haiku. So this idea of seasonality. I'll tell you what, let's have a look at that haiku in English. And there are many translations of Bashu's great haiku. I'm not using any PowerPoints today, you will notice that. We're eschewing any kind of technology other than we're in the technology, and Alice is later going to show us a video, so we are going to use a little bit. So I'll take this off here, turn this up here. Old pond. A frog leaps in, water's sound. Old pond, a frog leaps in, water's sound. Now that's nothing like 575, and yet this is the most famous translation of it by William Higginson. And there are hundreds of translations. And in fact, we can make our own. Usually when I work with kids, they come up with their own translation of it. Old pond, a frog leaps in, suddenly becomes jumps in, and water's sound sometimes becomes splash. Old pond, a frog jumps in, splash. It's just as good. So that's not 575. What's happening here? Well, that word ya at the end of the second line of the poem in Japanese is an indicator to us why we might perhaps not be using 575, because that is almost an exclamation mark, and we don't speak those things in English. We kind of intone them, but we don't speak them. Yet in Japanese, ya is kind of an exclamation mark. And so we have to think about haiku in English. How do they work in English? And I think the best way to look at that is to actually read some haiku now together. And when I say together, I'm going to be the human PowerPoint, and we're going to read some haiku. I have to put my glasses on. So seasonality. Some of you mentioned that haiku probably should be seasonal, and you're perfectly right. If our haiku are going to be 3 lines, we'll keep them as 3 lines, and they're going to be short, and we're going to have them around 15 syllables, give or take a few. So we're not aiming for it to be exactly 575, but we're aiming for it to be a short poem, 3 lines. And I'm suggesting to you that it's going to be in 2 parts. And that addresses the thing that some people said in their when they spoke to Alice and Alice read them out about juxtaposition, that putting things next to each other within a short poem sets up some kind of resonance. I'm going to read some poems to you, and I'd like you to think about 3 things. One, simple one. Is it 575? After a while, you can stop thinking, is it 575? Because I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. Seriously. What matters is that it feels like a haiku. It looks like a haiku. When we hear it, we think haiku. So I want you to look for a seasonal reference. In Japanese, a seasonal reference, in haiku, we call it a kigo. And I hear people say things like, oh yes, but Japanese culture, they have so many, they're so in touch with the seasons and we don't have that. I think that we're doing ourselves down. You have so many seasonal references in your head, and our children do as well. We only have to say certain words and we're immediately in a season. If I say daffodil, we're straight away in spring. If I say falling leaves, we're in autumn. And our language and our culture is littered with such references. So when I read the poem, we're going to look for a seasonal reference. If I said kite, I'm using this just to give you an example. People fly kites all year round. But kite is actually seen as a spring kigo, because maybe when it's the first time that we see kites. And so a kite, if I said a kite in a poem, unless I give some other reference, I'm in spring. Let's go for it. Okay, I'm doing the reading now. Church. Oh, you might think that I've gone a bit mad, by the way. I'm going to read these poems twice, because traditionally, as haiku poets, we read our poems twice. And it's a good thing to do with your children as well, because it builds their confidence in reading out. Also, it's good for me, because as a haiku poet, if I go and do a reading in a pub, and they're paying me to do a reading, haiku are so short that if I didn't read them twice, they wouldn't pay me at the end of the night, I'm sure. It extends it. So let's go for it. Church bells. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches. Church bells. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches. Okay, I'm stopping. Let's just analyze that poem. So what is the seasonal reference in that poem? This one's an easy one. Anybody going to say?
Please feel free to unmute and shout out.
I can see Robert said winter. You're right. Of course it's winter. Church bells. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches. I spoke about a poem in 2 parts. And when I say it's a poem on 3 lines in 2 parts generally, it's that we have what we call a phrase and a fragment. The fragment is maybe something glanced, something heard, a very short fragment. It's not even approaching a sentence. In this case, it's church bells. And then we have a phrase, something approaching a sentence, but not quite one, perhaps. Here we have the weight of fresh snow on bare branches. So when we're writing our haiku and when we're encouraging our children to write haiku, I suggest we take them outside, and we'll go outside later, really. We're going for a walk. We're going for a walk through Newport, actually, a little bit later on, okay? So take them outside, have some paper with them. They're just going to look around them, find a space, listen, smell, touch, look, and just make some notes, make some fragments and some sentences. A crisp packet rolling across the playground. Whatever they see. And we're also looking perhaps to not use metaphor at all. Now, I know you'll have been teaching simile, metaphor, etc., and we get into this Western poetics thing. We're just going to show things as they are. Basho said, to know of the pine, go to the pine. And to know of the bamboo, go to the bamboo. And in doing so, leave yourself behind, leave your own thoughts behind. And the poetry will then issue of its own accord. And that's what we're aiming for. Church bells. This juxtaposition, we're looking for a keregi. Now, the fragment can be at the front of the poem or at the end of the poem. In this case, our fragment's at the start. Church bells. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches. For a small poem, there's quite a lot of thinking to do here, because when I get my fragment, I can either put that at the front or at the end of the poem. What does it sound like at the end of the poem? And this is the kind of questions we'd be asking our children. All right, let's try it at the end of the poem. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches, church bells. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches, church bells. Actually, it could work that way. It's not too bad. Might work that way. Choosing where to break their phrase. The weight of fresh snow on bare branches. Well, that doesn't work, does it? So writing out their phrase and then deciding how they're going to break it, where they're going to put it. The front, first two lines of their phrase, the fragment at the end. There's quite a lot of work with a very small amount of text that you can do with a haiku. So all the other things that you've got in the national curriculum to look at, you can begin to look at, especially syntax or lack of syntax. Where do I put a bit of syntax in? Do I want the article in? Do I not want the article in? All in the space of 3 lines. But really, let's set aside all those other things that we've got in the national curriculum. It's about enjoying going outside and writing things. I'll carry on. I'm going to do this quickly. I'll try and do it kind of, I'll do it Bob Dylan style if I could, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't work. So, a bright breeze, dandelions just higher than the grass. A bright breeze, dandelions just higher than the grass. Sand in my slippers. All these little white daisies closed up for the night. Sand in my slippers. All these little white daisies closed up for the night. Nearly Mother's Day. My best daffodils bent low in the constant rain. Nearly Mother's Day. My best daffodils bent low in the constant rain. Winter wonderland. Even the burnt out car looks beautiful. Winter wonderland. Even the burnt out car looks beautiful. Sweeping leaves. Too many starlings to count up. Sweeping leaves. Too many starlings to count up. In the weeds, 101 striped caterpillars. In the weeds, 101 striped caterpillars. Dahlias, still blooming in November, their whiteness. Dahlias, still blooming in November, their whiteness. Picnic in the shade, two large koi passing under a lily. Picnic in the shade, two large koi passing under a lily. Piercing wind, the chestnut seller's fingerless gloves. Strange calligraphy in the barbed wire fence. Bindweed. Strange calligraphy in the barbed wire fence. Bindweed. Such freshness. Sycamore seeds spinning in a puddle. Such freshness. Sycamore seeds spinning in a puddle. Longer days, large white geese amongst pregnant sheep. Longer days, large white geese amongst pregnant sheep. Frozen stars, poking an empty wasp's nest with a stick. Frozen stars, poking an empty wasp's nest with a stick. I think it's always important to read poems, whether they're haiku, sonnets, whatever they might be, with the people that you're with, whether they be 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 63-year-olds. Were there any haiku there that you couldn't possibly find the seasonal reference to?
Maybe give us one that looks a bit tricky, Paul, and we'll see if we can do it.
The one that people find the most difficulty with is strange calligraphy in the barbed wire fence. Bindweed. Strange calligraphy in the barbed wire fence. Bindweed. Does anybody want to throw a guess at what season is that one written in?
Feel free to put it in the chat or shout out.
I can see
we're getting some different ones. Early autumn, spring, autumn, spring. Personally, I felt autumn.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we've got a mix of spring and autumn.
Why did you think autumn, Alice?
To me, I can imagine the bindweed sort of woven between the fence, and to me that's I don't know, I can see it as kind of not a fresh green but a sort of older or dying tree or bindweed, and to me that seems to be autumn. I don't know if that's right or wrong.
Well, this I chose to read that one because it's probably an example of, for many of us, we say that, for many of us haiku poets, we're quite happy that the interpretation happens in the listener or the reader's head, that you're bringing something to the poem as well. The reader almost finishes the poem for themselves in their head. And if we've been clever enough, it takes them someplace they've been before. So if for you, Alice, that takes you to spring, where the bindweed in the fence is still visible without any leaves upon it, or autumn when the leaves have disappeared, that's fine. And it could also be the same in spring. Actually, it's probably late summer, early autumn is the key goal for bindweed, because that's when we see the white flowers. But in actual fact, this poem is about when we actually see the fence itself again. And this poem, I never wrote it with this intention. This poem is now in the Holocaust Memorial Museum in America, and it's been read at various memorial services in the National Arboretum. It was read when they opened the National Arboretum in England, which is in memorial of soldiers that have died. But it wasn't written with that intention. And it wasn't written with the intention of being a Holocaust poem. But it was picked up and is now used that way. And in fact, a Japanese artist made a haiga. And I want to mention haiga now, because the JAL Foundation's competition is really about a haiku, your children writing haiku and then sitting it alongside an image, a picture. And the picture, generally speaking, wouldn't be a direct representation of the haiku, and the haiku wouldn't be a direct representation of the picture, but they would link together somehow. And in this case, a Japanese haiga maker drew a picture of a barbed wire fence which was made of metal glasses. So wire glasses that had been thrown onto a huge heap and then made into a fence, and it had the Star of David in the middle of it with this poem there. Seasonality. Do you know what? Let's have a go at writing some, shall we? Have you got a pen and a pencil with you? Or a pen and paper, pencil and paper, whatever. I want to take you on a walk. I want to take you on a walk. And I don't want to take you on a walk anywhere esoteric. We could have shown you some nice pictures of London with all its fantastic landmarks. If anything, haiku are about the ordinary. Sharing back the ordinary that's around us all the time. And when we share them in that way, they become somehow extraordinary, or they can become extraordinary. They don't always become extraordinary. So, Alice, have you got a video for us of, we're going to take you through a walk through Newport. And as you're walking through Newport, you've got 5 minutes to walk through Newport. And as you walk through Newport, take in everything that's going on around you and see if you can come up with a 3-line poem, a phrase and a fragment, a haiku that you're going to share back to us. And I think, Alice, you can, when people have finished writing their haiku, if they want to show they've written it, is there something they can press or something? I don't know.
Yeah, they can raise their hand, or you can just write something in the chat like finished or ready. As people are writing, Paul, if they have questions, can they ask you or directly, or would you like to sort of save those for the end?
They can ask me if they like. It would be quite nice to just give people, I think you'll need 5 minutes to collect some phrases and fragments and then put together a haiku-like poem. We're looking for a haiku-like poem. Some will be more haiku-like than others, but just have fun having a go at writing some, yeah? And if you can write it big enough, you can even do the thing I was doing, hold it up. So what we're looking for are phrases and fragments. Don't worry too much about seasonality at the moment, and seasonality won't be held against you in the competition either. The children won't be expected to necessarily have a seasonal reference, although it's nice if they do. Shall we do the video?
Yeah, I'm ready now, Paul. So yeah,
it.
I'm going to play it.
We started from the beginning.
We're coming up to about 5 minutes soon. So I'll let the video run for about 10 or so more seconds and then I'll stop.
Are we back?
Okay. Yes, so that was the sights and sounds of Newport. I can see somebody has their hand raised already. Andy, would you like to share your haiku?
Let's go with it, Andy. Let's go with it.
Okay. Okay, here it is. Bold bollards bristle. Sun gleam now seasons turn good, and all snow is gone. Bold bollards bristle. Sun gleam now seasons turn good, and all snow is gone.
Do you know what? There's beautiful imagery in there. And if haiku are imagistic poems, and we've definitely got imagery there. If I were working with you now, I'd probably say, you've gone for the 575 there, Andy, haven't you?
Yep.
So what's happened is you've got a lot of images there, and maybe our haiku are better when they're condensed down to just maybe 2 images or 1 image,
Right.
and something happened.
Excellent. Oh,
So
thanks. That's really helpful.
if we go for the first, just say it again for me.
Bold bollards bristle. That's the first.
Yeah,
That's
that's your fragment. So
that's my fragment.
You've got the fragment, yeah.
And then I've got sun gleam now seasons turn good, and all snow is gone.
And again, you've got a phrase split across 2 lines. And so therefore you've got the basic structure of a haiku. So that's really good. I'd probably look, if you can cut it down even further, if you were working with it, you'd look to see, do I need all those words in there? You've done a classic 575, but sometimes it just feels a little bit crowded. So natural speech, if we can encourage a natural speech, then that's helpful. I tried to write one while we were doing it as well. I'm not saying this is a great haiku. It might not even be as good as yours, Andy, actually. So mine was, I just noticed it out of the corner of my eye down the left-hand side near the beginning of the walk. Shop door shade. A woman gives the homeless man a few coins. Shop door shade. A woman gives the homeless man a few coins. You can see I was messing around with it a little bit there up at the top. So that was mine. Who else has got one? Let's have a look.
There's a lot in the chat, Paul, but I wonder if anyone would like to read theirs out.
And I've got one. Rhubarb juice. The young woman's small red purse. Rhubarb juice. The young woman's small red purse.
Oh, that's beautiful, Paul. I love it. I love it. You've got, again, it's not 575. You counted, you've done kind of a mirrored thing of what was it? 343, was it?
343.
343. But it works perfectly. It's a moment captured, isn't it? That you've just seen and then you're sharing it back with us. Could you read it again for me?
I'll just read it. Okay, rhubarb juice. The young woman's small red purse. Rhubarb juice. The young woman's small red purse.
Thank you. That's beautiful. You see that natural way of speaking? A natural phrase just split over 2 lines, juxtaposed against the fragment. Rhubarb juice. Rhubarb juice always puts me in the season when my grandfather, when I grew up in Sheffield, and I used to go and stay with my granddad at his council house in Firth Park in Sheffield. And he used to sit me on the back step at the beginning of summer, and he had a rhubarb patch, and I would sit there with a bag of sugar, probably the rhubarb juice running down my chin as I dipped it in and ate it. So you brought that memory back to me there. Thank you. Who else would like to read one? Could you put Philip up on screen for us?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Shadowed streets. Dry sun on paved dust. She laughs. Shadowed streets. Dry sun on paved dust. She laughs.
This is a haiku that doesn't match the form I said, but it's a perfect haiku. This is why when we have guidelines, they are just guidelines. Here, this haiku, your haiku, Philip's in 3 parts, isn't it really? And so it's not the phrase and the fragment that's suggested, but it's a very imagistic poem, and it sets up all kinds of things in my head. Could you read it again for me?
Yes.
Or for us.
Shadowed streets. Dry sun on paved dust. She laughs.
I can hear her laughing. I can hear her laughing. Thank you.
Karina, would you like to read yours?
Sure. I wrote a couple. I'll just read one. Blue skies, a girl taps a melody of love on her phone. Blue skies, a girl taps a melody of love on her phone.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Karina. That was great. Did you say you had another one as well?
Not as exciting, but bicycle unlocked, shopping bags full of sunshine. Bicycle unlocked, shopping bags full of sunshine.
That's great too, isn't it? I mean, it's a direct image just shared back with us, and shared back in such a short form, and yet it's poetic, isn't it too? Beautiful. And the melody, the love melody tapped out on her phone. Well, would we like, I'd love to know what that was. Who else? Somebody else?
I'm going to read it. Softly. Gray sea, no fish, but signs and people. Gray sea, no fish, but signs and people.
Oh, no fish, but signs and people. Yes, beautiful. I heard it. Fantastic. Again, the phrase and the fragment sets up a juxtaposition between the 2 parts of the poem. And I tell you what, this is probably the best group I've had work with me online. Mind you, you're the only group that I've worked online with. No, I'm kidding. It's everybody so far that's read them and read them with such confidence as well. You'll find, I find, that our students, even those that don't normally read, are often quite happy to read haiku out, because they don't feel stressed about it. And our job is to make people not feel stressed about reading their poems out. And we also need to be strong enough to help them when they've written their poem, to point things out to them. Is there anybody else, Alice, that's got stuff there too?
There's so many, but I will pick one or two.
Because we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left, haven't we?
Yes, we've not got very long. We are happy to stay for 5 or 10 minutes after if people have questions about teaching haiku or how to introduce them to their students. So we can run on a bit, but of course if you have to leave, please do. Here's one by Dion. Determined weeds fighting through the cobbled city streets. Determined weeds fighting through the cobbled city streets.
Fantastic. Again, that phrase, the way that it's spoken, just written out there, and the weeds, you feel the weeds pushing their way through. In fact, although they're not meant to be metaphorical, we often find metaphor for our own life through just looking at what nature's doing. And how often have I myself felt like a weed trying to fight through all kinds of things, not the least bureaucracy in schools usually. When I was teaching, I taught for 30 years. So thank you very much for that one. Another one, Alice?
Yes, this one's Catherine's. 12:15, children chatting as an old lady passes. 12:15, children chatting as an old lady passes.
Do you want to carry on? That's great. Just read as many as we've got time to hear.
Okay. Summer Street, the click, click, click of her cane.
I saw that woman. I saw that woman on the video. Yes.
Yeah, what I've noticed, Paul, is that a lot of people have picked up on things that I've also jotted down and ideas, but yeah, it's quite different to the things that I've composed. So it's really interesting to see.
Let's have that one again.
Summer Street, the click, click, click of her cane. Here we go, Robert's one. A padlock holds this world to another, rainbow colours. A padlock holds this world to another, rainbow colours.
Wow.
City centre, hot summer's day, but still wearing a mask. City centre, hot summer's day, but still wearing a mask. That's by Kay.
I notice people nodding their heads when they hear it, and often it's with the last line that it comes. And in the West, we call this the aha moment, the moment where you suddenly go, oh, yeah, I've got it. Because sometimes they're a bit difficult to grasp, haiku, or people think they are, but they're not. And we suddenly get that realization of it's something we've experienced too. And we have that, yes. One more?
Let's see. High Street, an angel props up a bicycle. High Street, an angel props up a bicycle.
Wow. Do you know what? We've got to come to an end, haven't we, Alice?
Yes. Well, what I was going to say, Paul, is I was going to remind everyone that if they feel inspired today, we would love for them to enter the World Children's Haiku Contest to,
Do you want to put yourself up on screen and tell people, rather than just looking at everybody's looking at my mug at the moment.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So yes, the World Children's Haiku Contest is running until February 2022, and that's open to all children aged 15 and under. And we would, love you to do haiku, go outside, as Paula said, with your students and your children. We also have, as a reminder of what Paul said today, we have our How to Haiku video available on our website. And also underneath that is a haiku booklet, which Paul has produced. And that has worksheets in for writing haiku outside and sort of recaps the phrase and the fragment. And there's some worksheets about seasons in haiku as well. So you can use those with young people and students also if you're planning to teach haiku. As I said, we should be finishing at 5, but if Paul is happy to and people have questions, we can stay for a few minutes of questions. If you would like to ask something, please do type it into the chat or raise your hand.
Alice, somebody asked quite early on if Paul could talk a little bit more about haiga.
Oh, haiga. Okay. So all that haiga means is, I'm sure that you've all seen Japanese prints that have got writing on them. And often the writing will be a poem. It might be a haiku, or it could be a tanka, a 5-line poem. And a haiga is where you take a picture and words and sit them alongside each other. And this is really what the competition is about. It's not just about the words. It's not just a haiku competition. This is a competition where our children are encouraged to make a picture. And I don't think it can be a digital picture, can it, Alice? It has to be a drawn or a collage picture. And then the children put their writing on top of the picture, and we always get some beautiful ones done, and that's all it means, really, a picture and writing together, not each describing each other, but linking and shifting from each other so that we get some kind of resonance set up in our head. I hope that helps. I'll just finish what I was going to say, so people might want to leave now. They've had enough of me. I hope you enjoy writing haiku, because if you can write haiku alongside your students as well, if you go out into the, you don't have to go a long way. Basho said, to know of the pine, go to the pine. To know of the bamboo, go to the bamboo. To know of the playground, go to the playground. To know of the car park, go to the car park. To know of the supermarket, go to the supermarket. To know of the high street, go to the high street, and let your own thoughts go, and just collect images and phrases, bring them back to the classroom, work on them together, make pictures, and enter the competition, and have fun, really. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much to you as well, Paul. I think everyone's enjoyed it a lot, and all created beautiful haiku. So I look forward to seeing entries into the contest. And if there's no other questions, then I think we'll end it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.